Good evening and welcome to Witch Rising. I am Reverend Mary Hawk, and on this particular episode, we are going to be talking about reproductive rights and what this assault on reproductive rights of women in America really means. And certainly feel free to comment if you are watching on social media, and I'll respond to your comments as I can. So, since the overturn of Roe v. Wade, at this point in time, 24 states have enacted some form of legislation restricting abortion rights. 24 states. That's almost half of all states are restricting abortion access at this point. That is terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. And abortion is healthcare, folks. It's not just about the right to obtain abortion. Hi, Noreen. Thank you. Let's talk about my situation. I am menopausal now. Hi, Rosemary. Thank you both for joining me. But in the last 10 years, before I reached menopause, I had a variety of health issues. Diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. And even though I'm happily married and we're reasonably financially secure, and we would have welcomed a baby, the odds of me carrying a healthy baby to term were frankly somewhere between slim and none, with the odds very much on me losing a baby or leaving my own health severely damaged. In fact, the last thing I needed to do from about age 40 on was get pregnant. So it's about, and in many states, my home state of Tennessee is one, Texas is another one. It is almost impossible to obtain an abortion right now, no matter what the mother's state of health. And this is extremely dangerous. And let's just discuss this for a minute. This is not about protecting children. It isn't, because if this was about protecting children, there would not be children in the state of Tennessee sleeping on the floors of offices at the Department of Human Services because they have no place to place them. There would be legislation addressing it, and there isn't. This is all about patriarchal control of women and women's bodies. This all goes back to the idea that women are nothing but breeding cattle. And we're not, damn it. If you're not scared and angry, you aren't paying attention. And again, I want to thank everyone who's joining me on social media, and please feel free to leave a comment in the chat. And this patriarchal view of women and reproductive rights goes way back. In the 1970s, when the birth control pill became available, many doctors refused to prescribe it to women who were not married. And other doctors were not prescribing it at all because married women were supposed to be having babies. And single women weren't supposed to be having sex at all. We weren't supposed to have control over our bodies at all. Hi, Sarah. Thank you for joining me. And moving forward, even in 1970, to tell you my mother's story, she had a very sick pregnancy with my younger brother. There were many complications. They scheduled an early C-section because of the various complications. They actually had told my parents he likely would not survive. And the doctors also told her that they were going to go ahead and tie her tubes because she didn't need to get pregnant again. Neither of my parents are now living, so I can't confirm this with them. But the way I remember her telling this to me was not that the doctors asked her permission to tie her tubes or discussed with her that it was inadvisable for her to get pregnant again after all the complications she had had with this pregnancy. They just told her, you don't get pregnant again. We're tying your tubes. So they didn't give her any agency. To be fair, since this was their second child, my parents probably would have chosen not to have another child. But as she told me the story, they didn't give them the option. They just said, this is it. We're making this decision for you. Now, fast forward to 2014, still here in the wonderful state of Tennessee. My daughter was 26 and she was pregnant with my granddaughter. It would be her second living child, and she decided this was as many children as she and my son-in-law could support, and she would get her tubes tied. She made a reasoned, logical decision based on the circumstances, also discussed with me the fact that if something were to happen to her husband, she would need our help supporting two children, and she certainly couldn't afford a third under those circumstances, and we agreed. And when, during her OB appointment, she began discussing getting her tubes tied, uh, she discovered that in the state of Tennessee, she could not just get this scheduled while she was in the hospital. She could go ahead and do the preliminary paperwork, but it would have to be scheduled at least 6 weeks after the birth of her child. And they had to discuss all possible scenarios. Well, what if this child doesn't survive? What if down the line you and your husband want another child? What if your husband leaves you and you find someone else and he wants more children? What if King Kong attacks and you want more children? I mean, what are all the scenarios here? But what they did not want to do was grant a 26-year-old woman the agency to know her own mind and be able to say, two children is what I have the emotional and physical resources to take care of, and I am stopping at this point. And again, we're not breeding cattle. We're not second-class citizens, except we are really, because we don't have full control over our bodies. We can't make a complete determination of how we're going to live our lives. Are we going to have children? How many children are we going to have? When are we going to have children? And all these things are very, very important decisions. And they need to be made by a woman and her partner about when is right for them. Hi, Michael. Thank you for joining us. So, yes, what we are seeing here is our elected officials, many of them, trying to roll back the clock and take women back to the class, back to being second-class citizens. I mean, how many women can remember when you couldn't get a bank account in your own name or get a credit card in your own name? The story that comes down in my family of my great-grandmother who was left a widow in the Depression, and hey, Bradley, and the dry goods store immediately canceled their running account when my great-grandfather passed from pneumonia. And she supported 4 kids by herself in the Depression by running a boarding house and growing a huge garden and feeding them herself and taking in boarders. When they started the WAC camps, she served 3 shifts of breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and that's how they survived. But no one expected her to be able to do that. So, I come from a long line of strong women, by the way. So, what can we do about access to reproductive health care? Because restricting abortion rights is one step on a slippery slope down to probably restricting access to birth control. That will be next on the agenda. So, things we can do. Number 1, there is in both houses of Congress the Women's Health Protection Act of 2023. It was introduced February 9th. It's in committee. And contact your elected officials and ask them to support it. Can't emphasize that enough. Wherever your officials stand, write them, call them, email them, fax them, do it all several times. Get your friends and family to do it and tell them you support this act. It would guarantee women's access to abortion care. Check with your local Planned Parenthood for events in your area. They are always working on events where you can go and advocate. Generally at the local level, look, They will be rallying around your local state capitals when bills come up for consideration. And it's also a good way to check with the like-minded people. You can check with your local ACLU as well. And don't forget that as magical people, our words and deeds have effect. And I am going to throw it open for discussion at this point. I know we've got several people on social media, so I'd love to hear your questions and comments. And again, I do encourage everyone to work on equal rights for everyone, magically doing this as empowering. For those of us who are Karelian, bodily autonomy is part of our manifesto. I know several other traditions have similar statements. And anybody have a question or comment they want to make right now? Or y'all just want to listen to me talk for the next 13 minutes? I can do that too. I can get all kinds of mileage out of this. Other tips for women, in the living in states with this type of atmosphere, do not use a period tracker app on any of your devices. There's this lovely thing called a paper calendar. That's how we did it way back in the 80s when I had to start tracking such things myself. Do it the old-fashioned way. But don't put that information out in cyberspace. If you are in a state where your access to abortion is restricted and you suspect you are pregnant, if you buy a pregnancy test, for heaven's sakes, pay cash. Don't put it on your credit card. Don't put it on your debit card. Pay cash for it. Don't leave a trail, especially if you expect you might be traveling out of state to access an abortion. Don't leave a paper trail. Don't make any post on social media about what you suspect. Just keep it very low key and do not tell anyone you literally do not trust with your life. And I would be prepared to pay cash when you get there, since some states are looking to try and even restrict women from traveling out of state. That probably is not going to pass a constitutional test, but at the same time, it's going to be a nasty court fight. So, and does anybody have anything they'd like to say? Come on, folks. Questions, comments? Especially want to thank Michael and Bradley for joining us. It is so nice to have men who are allies. And be sure to educate yourself on exactly what the laws are in your area where you live. And again, ACLU.org and Planned Parenthood are both great resources for this. And So I want to thank everyone who is joining us tonight. And I'm also going to point out that the United Nations has long held that among basic human rights are the access to reproductive health care, including the access to abortion. Krista, welcome. Yes, we are talking about activism regarding abortion tonight. And I will be covering activism on other topics, but I'm going to tell you right now, this one's near and dear to my heart. So I'll be covering it frequently. Have you got any questions or comments, Krista? And again, I just want to point out that every time somebody was talks about it's about protecting children, no, it's not. Because the same people who are sponsoring legislation to restrict abortion are also restricting SNAP benefits, food stamps. They are not trying to expand education. They do not want to expand health care. And Cherry says they couldn't play it on Facebook. Cherry, which Facebook page were you looking at, please? If you wouldn't mind telling me. And Dina, you are welcome. I am glad to share those suggestions and I will repeat them and you can please pass them on if you live in a state that restricts abortions. And do not use a period tracker app. Do not. You do not know where that can go. I tracked it on a calendar little paper calendar I carried in my purse for many years. It doesn't hurt you. If you have to buy a pregnancy test and you are considering an abortion at all that you will have to cross state lines for, pay cash. Don't put it on a debit card. Don't put it on a credit card. All right, you couldn't watch it on the Magic TV Facebook page. I will check on that. Thank you. And pass these tips on, please, but do not leave an electronic trail. Don't discuss it on any form of social media, and I wouldn't text it to anyone, IM it to anyone. Remember, texts, IMs, and social media posts never die. They always live on the server somewhere and they can always be found by somebody who knows. Thank you, Dina. And I don't have to worry about it anymore either, but that doesn't mean I'm not concerned about what can happen to my sisters. And I certainly might have needed abortion for medical reasons, as I shared earlier. Any time from 40 on, if I had become pregnant, it would have been a very high risk pregnancy. And even though my husband and I would have welcomed a child, we might well have had to make what would have been a painful decision for us that because of my health, to go ahead and terminate the pregnancy because I couldn't carry a healthy child to term and likely would have damaged my own health. And as Cherry points out, the same people who are trying to restrict abortion, that restrict abortion in Oklahoma are the same ones trying to get rid of the Indian Children Welfare Act. Of course, because this is never about children. If it were about children, then it would be easy for a single mother to get help. It's not. It's a struggle to get help to pay for child care. It's a struggle to get help with prenatal care if you're not working in many states. It is a struggle to get help with housing, with food, with any transportation, with any of your needs. And yes, Janet, the men in government should feel ashamed, but they don't feel ashamed because this is all about restricting women and controlling women. And yes, the same people who are restricting abortion are also the ones who are hurting the LGBTQ community. And I will be addressing that in future episodes. And I'll be inviting different guests to join us. I intend to address all kinds of topics of inequality on Witch Rising. I'm just getting started with reproductive rights because this one is just seriously getting to me in a very, very personal way since it is just such an attack. Janet, you have written a raw poem about male force in the world. Just a second here. Janet, I'm going to post my email address here. And if anyone has any topics for me or anything they would like to share, Janet, if you would like to email me that poem and we can discuss you coming on and reading it on a future show, I would love to do that. Anybody who has an idea of a topic for that we need to cover on Witch Rising or would like to come on and discuss something, please do so. And to Sleepy Toe, yes, I am a witch, have been for over 20 years now. So, and we are coming up on the end of our time here. Does anybody, got about a minute left, does anybody have any other questions for me? If not, I will be back next Sunday at 8 Central, 9 Eastern, 7 Mountain, and 6 p.m. And I'll place the email in the chat as well. It is Witch Rising Pagan World TV at gmail.com. And you can certainly send me any topics, anything you'd like me to cover. And we are now coming up at 8:30. So it is time for us to end. I want to thank everyone for joining me. And I hope to see you all next week.
Each Rising. With Reverend Mary Hawk. Purple Goddess by Reverend Don Lewis. Angry Uterus by Carrie Wagner. Announcer, Don Hawk. Music written and performed by Don Hawk. In loving memory of Mary Frankie Clark.